Hi, everybody. This is Hondo Carpenter from Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation Las Vegas Raiders Insider Podcast with my complete recap of the Las Vegas Raiders win over the Green Bay Packers. We got a lot to dissect tonight, a lot to talk about. As you know, the final score was 17-13. I want to say a couple things. You may remember me telling you that Don Shula once said to me, "You never apologize for a road win in the NFL." He considered all of them stealing a win. But I've heard many coaches say over the years, you don't apologize for any win. So there's a lot to talk about, and there are legitimate things to talk about. But first off, you start with the most important thing, which is the Raiders just won. And that's a big deal. This is a game they should have won, like they should have last week, but they should have won, and they did. Now, coming into the season, I said with coaching and talent, everything they had, I thought it was a 9-win team. I projected them at this point to be 3-2. They're 2-3. But they got the win. They're back on the winning track. They're one behind what I projected them to be for the year. And you never apologize for a win. So let's get into it because we got a lot to talk about. I think there's some legitimate issues in this organization that have to be addressed. First of all, I talked with you in my podcast this morning about 5 things that you wanted to see tonight. And we're going to dig into those and get into them because I think they're germane and very important. The first one was coaching. And I'm just going to tell you right now, I thought this game had multiple coaching errors. Multiple. For example, I'll give you one. Um, the Raiders late in the second quarter had a 3rd and goal. And Josh McDaniels calls for a play to the flat, and the receiver gets it at about the 10 or the 9, and I think he dropped it. But the point of the matter is when you're down there right after a big turnover, when all off season you stress turnovers and your team got one and get you down in the red zone and you're 3rd and goal and you're not throwing for the end zone, that's an absolutely epic failure. Period. And it tells me he doesn't trust Jimmy. Now, he's not going to tell you that, but if you trust your quarterback when you've got Davante Adams, Hunter Renfrow, Jakobi Meyers, Michael Mayer, Josh Jacobs, who can catch out of the backfield and, do some stuff. That's clearly what it is. Just like a couple weeks ago, he kicked a field goal, and I said it was a statement of I don't trust my offense. That's exactly what it was. But to me, it was a terrible play call. I don't understand. You go for it on 4th down, or you do some things that tell your team you really believe in them, and then down there, that's just if it's not the case, and the fact that he has been aggressive on 4th down would tell you that he does believe in him, then it's a coaching blunder. So it's one or the other. Either you don't have faith in your team or your quarterback, or it's a coaching blunder. You can decipher it or parse it to be anything that you want, but it is only one of those 2 things. It's nothing else. So it's very disappointed in coaching. This may surprise some of you, but Green Bay blitzed more tonight than they have the entire season. It was amazing to me how often. So the offensive line did not look good. I would use the term clean because there were several times when you had, 6 or 7 Packers coming and you had 5 guys. They took Illuminor out, put Thayer in at the start of the second half. Carmen Bracillo was certainly trying to do some interesting things. So I'm not going to hold that on coaching. I mean, he coaches the players that they give him, and he was making adjustments and trying to do some things. But when the Packers were blitzing, the Raiders didn't, this is a Josh Jacob thing, didn't make a whole lot of changes. They did some, but there wasn't a whole lot of changes. They just kept rolling the dice. So I realized that the offensive line did not look good, not pretending that it did. But I thought Carmen Bracillo did make some attempts at some coaching changes, but I don't care who you are. When you got 7-on-5 or 8-on-6 or whatever you have, or 7-on-6, even at times, you're going to get pressure. So again, I thought there was that. Another coaching error is the Raiders come back. There's just over a minute 40, I think a minute 43. And they Green Bay had the ball. The defense gets another big stop. They're going to have to punt. Now you're going to get the ball back. So normally, conventional wisdom, you take a timeout right there, save as much of the clock. Instead, they wasted almost 30 seconds by letting that ball just go. And then you saw they go to kick a field goal because at the end of the game, when they got the ball back, end of the half, when they got the ball back, when they would have had more time, it was a coaching blunder. Now, in fairness, I didn't get a chance to ask Josh about it after the game because someone else did, but he was asked about it. And he said he considered it. Okay, his call. He's the head coach. I disagree with it, making that clear. And I didn't ask about it simply because of it had already been asked. But the point is, it was not a performance in coaching. The Raiders did not win tonight because of coaching. On the offensive side of the ball, they did not win because of coaching at all. And I think that I think the coaching was atrocious? No. But do I think it was stellar? Not at all. And I think it was there's higher expectations on that coaching staff, and they were disappointing. The next thing I talked about is the $102 million offense that 5 games in still can't score 20 points. It is pathetic. Absolutely pathetic. I mean, Jimmy Garoppolo is your handpicked guy, and he's got more interceptions than touchdowns. I mean, I've said this before, but it's true. It's like walking into a Jenny Craig clinic and I'm your instructor. You can't go spend millions of dollars on your handpicked quarterback, and you're 5 games in, you're 2-3, and he's got more interceptions than touchdown passes. That's just ugly. It's ugly. And I was in with Colton Miller, talking with Colton and the Miller on video and off camera. So I didn't get in to get a question because I would have asked Jimmy specifically, you're not performing at the level that you need to. What do you have to do to turn that around? And again, you can say, well, there was pressure from Green Bay. Absolutely right. Absolutely right. No, not saying that there wasn't, but there were some bad throws, some bad reads, and some misses tonight that just can't happen. Listen, when they're bringing 7 and you got 5 blockers and you get sacked or you throw the ball away, there's no shame in that. None. But there is, when you have chances to make plays and you don't, you're paid tens of millions of dollars to make those plays, and you got to make them. Period. There's no getting around it. He's not a rook. He's got to make those plays. And Jimmy, if you just give you Jimmy's stats right here, he was 22 of 31, 208 yards. He was sacked 3 times, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception, with a rating of 86.5. So, again, underwhelming, completely underwhelming. The $102 million offense. Now, when you look at rushing, Josh Jacobs had 69 yards on 20 carries. I thought he was able to do some things. I was a little bit surprised that they didn't run more. There were a couple times when he was getting off some chunk plays, and I would have thought they had a chance to put Green Bay back on their heels and didn't. I think that was a little overthinking, just like when Josh said on that not taking a timeout on 3rd down. He says, I considered it. I think sometimes they're just overthinking, and there's paralysis by analysis. And so the $102 million offense did not perform. F. I mean, Spillane gets the ball down in there on a interception, and you can't punch it in. You got to kick a field goal. Unacceptable. And I said at the time that it's unacceptable. They needed a touchdown there. And listen, we all know you can kick a field goal at the end of the game and win, but they need touchdowns. And that was a brutal mistake. And your defense is giving you the ball. They got you the ball 3 times. Now, if you read my stuff, I talk about the rule of 5. The Raiders tonight, they had 3 interceptions, which I thought was extremely good. And they got 2 sacks. So they had 5. Obviously, the Raiders, the Raiders didn't get to the rule of 5. You can go back and read that in my game thread, what the rule of 5 is that almost guarantees a win. But it was a win, And again, coaching, I don't think was up to the standard that it should have been. And I don't, nor was the offense up to the standard that it should have been. The third thing I told you that they had to have was execution and discipline. Now, Marcus Peters is a liability unless it's a passing situation. In a passing situation, he's a real threat. The problem is you've got other corners that you need, and you have a Nate Hobbs who's physical, and a Meek Robertson who's physical, a Jacorian Bennett. Not saying they all played because they didn't, but Marcus Peters is here because of the Raiders' failures in drafting prior to Dave Ziegler and Josh McDaniels being here. He's a filler, with his ability as a pass defender, making $5 million a year. I mean, he's probably a 8, 9, 10, $11 million a year corner if he was a contributor in the rushing game. And he's not, but everybody knew that. He wasn't brought in changing, but he was a liability. But tonight he helped in the passing game, had a beautiful pass breakup that led to an interception. But I think he hurts this team when it comes to the rushing attack. Overall, though, when you look at this game and you look at it all, I think there's a lot of really good here. Again, passing, they gave up 182 yards, and rushing yards, they gave up 110. They gave up 290 yards to an NFL team. No shame in that game. No shame in that game. You held them under 300 yards. And oh, by the way, you kept them to 13 points. And they should have had more. But your defense was stellar. Okay, so execution, I thought there was not as many dumb penalties tonight. I'm not saying there wasn't some things you looked at, but there wasn't. And I thought guys on the defense especially executed. Offense, there was some drops. Offense, there was some misreads. So again, execution on the player side, I think on special teams was an absolute A, but when is it for this team? And on defense, I gave it a solid B, edging a B plus, probably a B plus if you really want to know the truth. And I thought offensive execution was a D. So quickly, coaching, D plus. And that's the whole team. That's counting special teams, defense, and offense. Special teams, A, defense, B plus, offense, D minus. When you look at the $102 million offense, it isn't producing. It isn't doing what it's supposed to do. I'm going to ask Josh McDaniels about that tomorrow in detail. I've got two big questions I'm going to ask him tomorrow that I think are really important. I did not ask them tonight because right after a win, when you've got a press conference tomorrow, I don't think is the appropriate time to do that because we're talking specifically about one game. My questions tomorrow are going to do holistically with the team as a whole and not just one game. So I'm going to ask them tomorrow. But they're interesting. The defense. So the fourth thing I told you that we had to look at was the defense. And again, B plus, A minus. And you got to understand, you spent $102 million on your offense. And so other than Maxx Crosby, you got a bunch of players. It's a blue collar lunch pail. Now, Robert Spillane was a big get. And by the way, I'm going to get into more of this later in the season. That was all Dave Ziegler, him and Marcus Epps. What a great and Ziegler identified I need him and made him a priority and got him. But Spillane has been really, really good. But he's still not a guy that's a household name around the league. Maxx Crosby is. And so this is really a no-name defense other than Maxx Crosby. And what do? They're not pretty. I'm not saying the men themselves are not handsome or ugly. I'm not getting into that. But they're not pretty, but they play enough for you to win. If this $102 million offense performed like a $102 million offense, at worst, you'd be sitting here 4-1 and maybe 5-0. But they're not. And so the Raiders are at 2-3, but again, B plus, A minus on the defense. And then the fifth thing I said that you needed to see was just win. it is imperative. You know, I have said this to you, and I know people don't want to hear it, but I'm in the locker room. I'm there. This team has not quit on Josh McDaniels, and I won't say they have until they do. And when they do, I'll say it. I think they're certainly questioning some things, but nobody's quit on them. Not one person has. Having said that, when you're not winning, frustration builds. It just grows. And sometimes just getting a win lets the steam out of the tea kettle a little bit, lowers the temperature a little bit. Winning covers a multitude of sins. I talked to several players about that tonight, and I think it's an absolutely germane question. So overall, I think there's some real questions. Josh McDaniels continues to offer some time management questions and some coaching decisions. Is he too focused on the offense that maybe the team as a whole is suffering? I think that's a very fair question. And I laughed. Somebody this week sent me an email basically telling me, see if I have the male parts to ask tough questions. You know what? Shut up. You go get this job and work it every day. I've proven I'm not afraid to ask any question. I don't need you to tell me if you had the male parts. Well, if you're so good at it, go get the job. The point of the matter is that there are times to ask tough questions. And again, I think it was absolutely germane to ask, what are you thinking on third down, not punting the ball? I mean, not calling a timeout. Very fair. Somebody did, or I would have. I think it's important to ask Josh McDaniels, do you think you're so focused on offense that it's hurting the rest of the team and they need your attention? I'm going to ask him about that. I think there are some other things to ask about. But a win is huge. They're 2-3. They're only one behind where I predicted them to be at this point. They've got the Patriots coming in here and should win that football game. That puts them at 3-3. Now, all of a sudden, they find themselves back at 500, 6 games in, and this team has a chance to get on a roll. I told you before this game, the next 6 are going to tell us a lot. Does Josh get that locker room turned around? Not turned around from not believing in him, but performing. Does he and his staff perform better? I think absolutely it is fair to point out player execution mistakes, but it is also very fair to talk about poor performance by some of his staff and him. And so that's the complete recap. The Raiders got a win. It was not pretty. Now, I told you after the Denver win, good teams find a way to win games when they don't play good. Okay. Now, you may argue this isn't a good team. I believe with the talent they have in the coaching, this team should get to 9 wins. I think over 500, you're a good team in the National Football League. If they don't get to there, then we're going to hold them to the standard of that's where they should have been. But this win was huge. Like Al Davis said, just win. You don't apologize at all for a win. But there's a lot to go for this team to work on in a very short week. You've got a lot of people in this organization tied to the Patriots. This is a very big game coming up. There's going to be a lot of emotion here in 6 days. It's going to be a game I predict the Raiders will win, which will get them to 500 and then get them starting to feel good. But if this team's going to get to 9, obviously Jimmy has to stay healthy, but he's got to play better. And the coaching has to help them. They're going to need coaching in one of these games where the coaching's out-coach somebody and the team's able to sneak a win. It's important. It's why in this league, coaches make so much money, and they should. But they also have the burden of responsibility. Now, a couple of things I want to address real quick. I want to just go over Jakobi Meyers, 7 receptions on 10 targets, 75 yards and a touchdown. He was phenomenal. Trey Tucker had 1 target, didn't catch it. 1 target for DeAndre Carter, didn't catch it. Hunter Renfrow, 2 targets, caught 1. Again, Hunter is just underutilized. Michael Mayer had 3 targets tonight, caught 2. I still think he's underutilized. But when you count Hoop in there, who had 2 targets and caught 2, I mean, Hooper's a guy that when he's targeted, good things happen. I think he needs some more targets. They need to be utilizing the tight end more. Got to get Hunter Renfrow in the game and Trey Tucker more. But I think that those are all fascinating. Now let's take a quick second, if you don't mind. I just want to go over and talk about Raiders defense a little bit. Diablo, he had 10 tackles again tonight. Spillane, 9 tackles, 2 interceptions. Spillane was unbelievable. Yeah, if you DVR'd the game, go back and watch. There were several times where you saw him moving guys, putting them in the right place. He was really, really good. And Max Crosby, 5 tackles. But dear God, y'all know the respect I have for Max. But I mean, just getting held, beat up, thrown down, laid on, whatever. And again, he influenced the game in an absolutely huge way. I do want to talk about one player in particular. Again, the offensive line was not great. I'm not saying that they were, but again, Green Bay blitzed more tonight than they have all year. In fact, I talked with somebody out in the hallway. I don't remember if it was in the hallway or by text, so forgive me. I just don't remember real quick. But somebody from the Green Bay organization, and I said, it appeared to me you blitzed more tonight than you have all year. And they said that they had. So they confirmed it. And I think the offensive line, again, you saw Carmen try to make some adjustments. And didn't see a lot of adjustments with Jakob in there or doing some other things by Josh. But I thought Dylan Parham, there were some plays, where multiple guys coming right at him and he can only block one. But there were several pancake blocks from him. I thought you can absolutely say, man, he struggled. But when there's 2 or 3 guys coming in your gap and you can only block one, I thought he held his own. So again, a win is a win. And that's all that matters. Green Bay did not play well tonight, but it doesn't matter because when the Raiders don't play well and win, we don't, ask them to give the win back. And if you play bad and lose, you don't ask them to give you the win back. So that's my recap. Again, I think there are some legitimate questions that have to be asked to Josh. I'm going to ask him tomorrow at the press conference. But for now, they get the win. That's what matters. They move to 2-3. They get a chance to let some steam off the tea kettle a little bit, take a little bit of pressure off, now respond in a short week. There's a lot to talk about this week, and we're going to talk about it. Next week's game is going to tell us a lot because remember, I said the next six. So I told you these next 6 were big. They're 1-0. There you go. And now the Raiders find themselves with 12 games to go. Still in year 2 of the Josh McDaniels regime, trying to figure out who and what they are. Interesting times tonight here at Allegiant Stadium. Thank you, everybody, for watching. I appreciate you. God bless you. I'll see you tomorrow at the press conference. And remember, from Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation, Las Vegas Raiders Insider Podcast, I'm Hondo Carpenter, part of the Fans First Sports Network. Thanks for joining us tonight, everybody. I appreciate you greatly, and I'm thankful for you.